They had my arm before I could say a word. Not one hand, two. One on my left elbow and one on my right, the specific grip of two security guards who have been trained to move a person efficiently through a lobby and who had decided, in the approximately 4 seconds between seeing me walk through the glass doors and crossing the marble floor toward me, that I was the kind of person who needed to be moved. I want you to understand the lobby before I tell you what happened inside it. The Meridian Grand Hotel on Peachtree Street in Atlanta is the kind of building that communicates its own importance before you have crossed the threshold. The exterior is all glass and steel, and the specific architectural language that says money has been invested here and the investment expects to be respected. The lobby is marble, white marble floors and cream marble walls and a reception desk of dark polished wood that runs the full length of the far wall, behind which three people in matching navy blazers stand in the specific attentive posture of people whose professional purpose is to make certain guests feel welcome. Certain guests. I was not in the assessment of the two security guards who had my arms by the time I was 12 steps inside the door, a certain guest. I was a street vendor. I sold handmade jewelry and carved wooden figures and handwoven baskets from a folding table on the corner of Peachtree and 16th, which I had been doing 6 days a week for 4 years, which had made me a known presence in that block in the specific way that regular presences become known. The regulars at the coffee shop on the opposite corner knew my name. The parking attendant at the lot across the street knew what time I arrived and what time I packed up and had more than once helped me carry my table when the rain came fast. And the tourists who came through that intersection in the warm months had purchased enough of my work that I had been able to put my daughter through 2 years of community college and had money set aside for the third year. None of this was visible in the moment the guards grabbed my arms. What was visible was the folding cart I was pulling behind me, the cart I used to transport my table and my inventory from the parking structure 3 blocks away to my corner, which I had been pulling through the Meridian Grand's lobby because it is the most direct interior route between the parking structure and my corner, and because in 4 years of selling on that block I had walked through that lobby dozens of times, never once stopped, never once questioned because the doorman on the morning shift. Some man named Robert who had been working that door for 11 years and who always raised 2 fingers in greeting when he saw me coming, had never indicated that my passage was unwelcome. Robert was not at the door that morning. He had called in sick. The man at the door was someone I had never seen before, and whatever assessment he had made of me when I walked through, he had apparently communicated to the security team in the lobby because by the time I was 12 steps inside, I had 2 hands on my arms. The guard on my left said, "You need to come with us." I said, "I'm passing through. I come through here every morning." The guard on my right said, "This is a private lobby. Guests only." I said, "I'm not a guest. I'm using the walk-through." "As I come through he said, "Ma'ams, you need to come with us now." The third guard, who I had not seen approach from the side, took hold of my cart. I said, "Please don't touch that, that's my property." He did not let go of the cart, and the two who had my arms began to move me toward the door, not gently. In the specific practiced way of people who move people efficiently with enough physical authority that resistance becomes difficult without becoming a scene, which is exactly what they were counting on, that the specific social weight of making a scene in a marble lobby would be sufficient to produce compliance from a woman with a folding cart who had been assessed as not belonging. There were approximately 30 people in that lobby, guests checking in at the reception desk. A man in a suit on his phone near the elevator bank, a family with luggage near the concierge, a woman in workout clothes crossing toward the fitness center entrance, all of them watching, some of them with the specific careful not watching of people who have decided that what is happening is not something they are going to intervene in. I did not make a scene, not because I was afraid, not because I did not understand my rights. But because something in me, the specific survival intelligence of a woman who has been selling on a street corner for 4 years and who has learned, through the daily experience of operating in spaces that were not designed with her in mind, when the scene will help and when the scene will only produce more of what is already happening, something in me said, wait, wait. There is something coming that you do not know about yet. They brought me to the revolving door and pushed me through it, and my cart followed, and then I was on the sidewalk in the November morning air, and one of the guards was saying something about trespassing, and the other was saying something about the right to refuse entry, and the third was holding my cart handle in a way that communicated they were considering whether to retain the cart as well. I said, "That cart goes with me." He held it for a moment longer. Then he let it go. The three of them stood in the doorway, inside the glass, on the warm side, looking at me on the outside in the cold. I stood on the sidewalk. I did not cry. I did not shout. I looked at the three of them for approximately 5 seconds. Then I heard from behind them and above them and from somewhere inside the lobby of the Meridian Grand Hotel a voice. The voice said, "What is happening here?" It was not a question. It was the specific register of someone for whom the answer to that question matters significantly and who has asked it in a room where they have the authority to require an answer. The three guards turned. I watched through the glass. And then the man who owned the Meridian Grand Hotel walked through his lobby toward his own front door, and everything that had been decided in the previous 4 minutes began to be undecided. My name is Adiz Miriam Okonkwo Williams. I am 44 years old. I have been selling handmade goods on the corner of Peachtree and 16th in Atlanta for 4 years. I have a daughter named Chisholm who is 21 years old and studying nursing. I have a folding table that I bought secondhand and repainted forest green, and I have a cart that I built from parts I found at a hardware store, and I have a canopy that I put up every morning at 7:15 and take down every evening at 6, and I have 4 years of knowing that corner well enough to know its weather and its foot traffic and its seasonal rhythms. I also have a name, a full name. And what the owner of the Meridian Grand Hotel knew about that name when he walked through his lobby toward his front door on a November morning is the part of this story that changes everything. Before the hotel lobby, I need to take you back. Not to a single beginning, but to the layered beginning, the several things that happened over several years that produced the specific morning I am describing. I came to the United States from Nigeria 22 years ago. I was 22 years old and I had a degree in business administration from the University of Lagos and a specific quality of ambition that my mother described as the family trait, the particular forward-leaning energy of someone who believes that what they build is more interesting than what they inherit. I had believed in that quality for 22 years. What the 22 years produced is a story that has two chapters, and the two chapters look so different from each other that most people who know me from the second chapter do not know the first chapter existed. The first chapter, I arrived in Atlanta with my degree and my ambition and the specific naive confidence of a 22-year-old who has been told that the combination of those things is sufficient to build something real. Over the following 12 years, I worked in corporate retail management, which is not glamorous work, but is work that teaches you things about inventory and margins and customer behavior and the specific architecture of how goods move from production to purchase that are useful regardless of the scale at which you eventually apply them. I learned those things completely. I moved up. By the time I was 34, I was a regional operations manager overseeing 7 stores in the Atlanta metropolitan area, with a salary that was comfortable and a title that was respected and a professional life that looked, from the outside, like the successful immigration story it was. And then my husband died. Daniel Williams died on a Tuesday in March when Chisholm was 9 years old, from a cardiac event that arrived without warning in the way that some endings arrive, Not at the end of a decline, but in the middle of an ordinary day, in the middle of an ordinary life with no opportunity for preparation. I will not spend many words on the grief because the grief is not what this story is about. The grief is the context. What I will say is that the grief reorganized everything, not just the emotional architecture of my life, but the practical one, because Daniel had been the co-manager of our household in the ways that matter financially, and the specific adjustments required by his absence revealed vulnerabilities in our financial structure that I had not seen clearly while he was present. I managed. The first year was the hardest. The second year was survivable. By the third year, I had found a new equilibrium, which is what people who are built to build things do. They find the new equilibrium and they begin building from it. The equilibrium I found was this: I left corporate retail management. Not because I was asked to leave, not because the work was not there, but because in the aftermath of Daniel's death, something in me had reorganized around the question of what I was actually building, and corporate retail management, which had been a means to an end, no longer felt like the right vehicle for the building. What I wanted to build was something of my own. I had always made things, jewelry from wire and stone, carved figures from small pieces of wood. Woven baskets from materials I sourced from a craftsperson in Ghana who shipped to me quarterly. I had made these things for pleasure since I was a child. My mother's hands had been her primary creative outlet, and I had inherited her hands along with the family ambition. After Daniel died, the making became something more than pleasure. It became the specific form of presence, being fully in one's hands in one moment, producing a specific thing that did not exist before that grief sometimes requires. I sold my first piece on a folding table at a neighborhood flea market 3 years after Daniel died. A carved wooden figure of a woman with her arms raised, which I had made over 3 evenings as a way of staying in my body during a week that kept trying to take me out of it. So a woman named Patricia Avery bought it for $45 and said it was the most beautiful thing she had seen at the market and asked if I had a card. I did not have a card. I made one the following week. 6 months later, I had a folding table on the corner of Peachtree and 16th. 4 years of the corner had taught me things that 12 years of corporate retail had not. And corporate retail had taught me the systems, the supply chains and the margin calculations and the customer flow analytics and the inventory management. The corner taught me the people, not in the abstract way that corporate retail teaches you about customer demographics and purchasing behavior. In the specific, daily, personal way of knowing that the woman who walks past at 7:45 every Tuesday has started stopping because her daughter is getting married in June, and she wants something handmade for the centerpieces. In the way of knowing that the man who always looks at my carved figures but has never bought one is building up to something, the specific energy of someone who is about to make a decision they have been approaching for months. In the way of knowing the corner, its moods and its weather and its rhythms and its people. I love the corner, not in a resigned way, not the way you love the thing you have when you cannot have the thing you wanted. In the specific way you love the thing that turned out to be the right thing, that turned out to produce what you needed it to produce, that turned out to be the specific form of building that your specific kind of building required. I also knew in the 4 years of the corner that the corner had a context. That it existed in a neighborhood, in a specific block of Peachtree Street in Atlanta, that was also in the process of building something, and that the building happening around me was the kind of building that changes the character of a block over time. The Meridian Grand Hotel was part of that building. It had opened 2 years before I set up my table, which meant it had been part of the landscape of my corner for 4 years. In those 4 years, I had walked through its lobby dozens of times. had sold pieces to guests who wandered out onto the sidewalk during their stay, had watched the neighborhood around it become progressively the kind of neighborhood that a hotel of the Meridian Grand's caliber expects to anchor. What I had not known in those 4 years was anything about the hotel's ownership structure. I had not needed to know, until the November morning when I needed to know it very much. I need you to subscribe to Black Diamonds right now, before this story goes any further, because what I am about to tell you about the hotel's ownership and about the man who walked through the lobby toward his front door is the part of this story that most people would not believe if they had not seen it themselves. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, drop your name and your city in the comments right now. Tell me where in the world you are watching from. And tell me if you have ever been moved through a space with a grip on your arm and a decision already made about who you were. This community is here for this story, all of it. Now let me tell you who owned the Meridian Grand Hotel. His name was Emmanuel Akaffer. He was 56 years old. He had come to the United States from Nigeria 30 years ago, which was 8 years before I arrived. He had built a hospitality and real estate portfolio over those 30 years that included 7 hotels in 4 cities, 2 commercial developments, and a property management company that managed 43 residential buildings across the Southeast. He was, by the measurement systems that the world uses for such things, extremely successful. He was also, as I would learn in the hours after the November morning, a man who had been sitting in the breakfast meeting on the second floor of the Meridian Grand when one of his staff, a junior manager who had been watching the lobby on the security feed, had come to the meeting room door and told him that 3 security guards were removing a woman with a folding cart from the lobby. Emmanuel Akaffer had left the breakfast meeting. He had walked down the stairs to the lobby. Had said, "What is happening here?" And then he had seen me through the glass on the cold side of his revolving door with my cart in the November morning, and something had crossed his face that the junior manager would describe to me later as the specific expression of a man who has recognized something unexpected. He pushed through the revolving door, he came outside. He looked at me. He said in Igbo, Ada letter 1 ECD B letter 1 E5 G letter 1 ECB, which means Ada is that. As I looked at him, I said also in Igbo, Emeka, because Emmanuel Akaffer was not a stranger to me. He was the older cousin of a woman I had known at the University of Lagos. A woman named Ngozi who had been my closest friend in my second and third year of university, and who had introduced me to her cousin when he came to visit campus during our third year, and with whom I had had one significant conversation about business and building that I had carried with me for 22 years without knowing that I was carrying it. I had not seen Emmanuel Akaffer since that campus visit 22 years ago. He had not seen me. Neither of us had known that the other was in Atlanta. Neither of us had known that the corner of Peachtree and 16th, where I had been selling my handmade goods for 4 years, was 1 block from his hotel. The 3 security guards were standing in the lobby watching their employer and the woman they had just removed from his lobby speaking to each other in a language they did not understand. Emmanuel said in English, "You have been on this corner," I said, "for 4 years." He said, "I walk past your table." I said, "I have never seen you." He said, "I come out the side entrance." He paused. "Because of the morning meetings, I take the side exit to the parking structure." I said, "I take the main lobby walkthrough." He said, "Yes, I can see that." He looked at the revolving door. He looked at the 3 guards visible through the glass. He looked back at me. He said, "Come inside." So I said, "Your security team just asked me to leave." He said, "I am asking you to come back inside." I looked at him for a moment, then I picked up my cart handle. I walked back through the revolving door of the Meridian Grand Hotel. Emmanuel Akaffer held the door. What happened in the next 2 hours is something I have described many times since and that I still find difficult to describe with the complete accuracy it deserves. Because what happened was several things simultaneously. It was a conversation and a reckoning and a reconnection and a business meeting, and something older and more personal than any of those categories adequately contains. We sat in the hotel restaurant, which was not yet open for the breakfast service, but which the restaurant manager opened immediately when a manual indicated we needed a table. My cart was placed in the luggage storage room with more care than it had ever been handled with. Coffee arrived without being asked for. The three guards did not come into the restaurant. One of them, the senior one, I later learned, waited outside the restaurant entrance for approximately 15 minutes before being told by the junior manager that he could return to his station. Emmanuel and I sat across from each other at a window table and we looked at each other across 22 years. He said, "Tell me about the coroner. Not about the hotel incident, not about the guards, about the coroner." He asked the question the way my business administration professors at Lagos had asked about projects, not what happened, but what are you building? I told him. I told him about the 4 years, about the inventory I made by hand, the jewelry and the carved figures and the baskets. About the revenue, which was sufficient but not expansive, sufficient for the apartment and Chisholm's tuition and the quarterly shipment from Ghana, and not much beyond that. About the corner's rhythms, the tourist traffic in the warm months and the neighborhood regulars in the cool months, and the specific relationships that 4 years of daily presence had built. He listened the way he had listened 22 years ago on that campus visit, completely, with the focused attention of someone who is not assembling their response while you speak, but who is actually receiving what you are saying. When I finished, he said, "What do you need? Not what do you want, what do you need?" The specific, practical question of a builder talking to a builder. I said, "I need what the corner cannot give me, scale. I can make what I make and sell it from my table at the rate the corner produces, which is sustainable but not growing. What I cannot do from the corner is reach the people who are looking for what I make but who will not find it by walking past a folding table." He said, "You need distribution." I said, "I need the right distribution, not any distribution. The kind that preserves the handmade quality, the specific thing that makes what I make worth what it costs while reaching a larger audience." He said, "I have 7 hotels." I said, "I know that now." He said, "The Meridian Grand has a gift shop. All 7 hotels have gift shops. They carry mass-produced goods from 3 vendors who supply 60% of the hospitality gift industry in the Southeast. The goods are not bad. They are not what you make." I said, "No, they are not." He said, "I want to show you something." He stood up. He led me through the hotel, not through the lobby with its marble floors and the memory of the morning's humiliation still fresh in the air, but through the back corridors, the operational spaces, the parts of a hotel that guests do not see and that reveal its actual character more accurately than any lobby. He showed me the gift shop, which was a well-appointed space near the elevator bank with good lighting and thoughtful display cases. He showed me the space beside the gift shop, an alcove that had been used as additional luggage storage and that he described as we stood in it as a space he had been thinking about. He said, "I have been thinking about this space for 2 years, about what it should be. The gift shop sells things people buy because they are in a hotel and they need a gift. What I have been thinking about is something different. A space that sells things people buy because the things are worth buying, a curated space. Things that are made rather than manufactured. Things that tell a story about where they come from." I looked at the alcove. It was approximately 400 square feet. Good ceiling height, a window that looked onto the courtyard garden. I said, "What are you proposing?" He said, "A partnership. Your work in this space with the infrastructure of the hotel behind it, the foot traffic, the guest services team who can speak to what's available, the display capability. We start here and if it works we expand to the other 6 hotels." I said, "On what terms?" He said, "You retain ownership of your inventory. I provide the space and the infrastructure at no cost to you. Revenue split 60-40 in your favor on everything sold through the hotel locations. You maintain your corner operation independently." I said, "Why 60-40 in my favor?" He said, "Because it is your work and your craft and your 4 years of building the thing that makes it worth selling." The hotel provides a platform, it does not provide the product. The split reflects that. I looked at him across the table. I said, "Why are you doing this?" He looked at me. He said, "Because Ngozi called me 2 months ago. She is living in London. She asked if I had found you yet. She said she had heard you were in Atlanta and she asked if I had found you." I said, "Found me?" He said, "She has been trying to track you down for 3 years. She lost contact after Daniel died. She said, Emeka, if you find her, you take care of her." And I said, "Ngozi, I will find her when I find her." He paused. "And then this morning your cart came through my lobby and my security team made a decision about it before I could make one." I said, "They had 2 hands on my arms before I had taken 12 steps." He said, "Yes, I know that, and I need you to know that what happened this morning is not what this hotel is." I said, "What is this hotel?" He said, "It is a place that was built by someone who was told many times that he did not belong in the spaces where buildings like this get built, and who built it anyway, and who walks past your corner every morning through the side exit, and who did not know for 4 years that the woman selling handmade goods on that corner was someone Ngozi trusted completely." If I had known, he stopped. I said, "If you had known," he said, "if I had known, I would have come to your table 4 years ago." The twist in this story is not the recognition. I know that some of you have been listening and thinking that the twist is that Emmanuel and I knew each other, that the hotel owner and the street vendor had a connection that neither of them knew existed until the morning of the lobby incident. That is a twist, but it is not the deepest one. The deepest twist is about Robert. Robert, the doorman who had been working the morning shift at the Meridian Grand for 11 years. Is the man who had always raised 2 fingers when he saw me coming, who had never once, in 4 years of my walking through that lobby, indicated that my passage was unwelcome. I found out 3 days after the November morning that Robert had not called in sick. Robert had been told not to come in that morning, not by Emmanuel. Emmanuel had not been involved in the staffing decision. The decision had been made by the hotel's operations manager, a man named Bradley Sutton who had been at the Meridian Grand for 18 months, and who had in those 18 months developed a policy of quote-unquote professionalizing the lobby experience, which was the language he used in internal communications that I would later see for a description of a set of decisions that amounted to making the lobby less comfortable for people who looked like me. Robert had been told on 2 previous occasions that his informal relationships with vendors and street-level workers in the neighborhood were not consistent with the hotel's brand standards. On the morning of November the 9th, Bradley Sutton had seen the weather forecast, a clear morning, significant foot traffic, and had called Robert and told him the shift was covered and he should take the day. He had then briefed the replacement doorman and the security team about the lobby standards he expected to be maintained. I was the first person the replacement doorman flagged. Robert found out what had happened to me when he came in for his next shift. He came to find me at my corner that afternoon, still in his uniform coat, and he stood at my table with the expression of a man who is carrying something he does not know how to put down. He said, "Adiz, I need to tell you something." I let him tell me. He told me about the 2 previous conversations with Bradley Sutton. He told me about the call that morning. He told me that he had suspected what might happen, that the briefings Sutton had been giving the security team had been creating an atmosphere in which people who looked like me were being assessed differently at the door, and that he had not done enough with that suspicion. He said, "I should have told someone, I should have told Emmanuel. I have known Emmanuel for 11 years and I should have told him what was happening in his lobby and I did not, and what happened to you happened because I did not." I looked at Robert. He was 63 years old. He had 11 years at that door. He had raised 2 fingers to me on 200 mornings. I said, "Robert, what happened to me is not your fault." He said, "I could have prevented it." I said, "Maybe." But the thing that needed to be prevented was being built by someone with more institutional power than you, and the preventing of it required someone with more institutional power than either of us. What happened on Thursday is that it found that person. He said, Emmanuel. I said, Emmanuel. Robert looked at me. He said, he is a good man. I said, I know, I knew that 22 years ago. He said, what is going to happen to Sutton? I said, that's not my decision to make. He said, but you could. I said, Robert, my decision is about what I build from here. What happens to Sutton is Emmanuel's decision and the hotel's process. I am not interested in being the instrument of that. I am interested in my corner and my work and what comes next. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded the way he had always nodded, a different version of the two raised fingers. He said, you're right. He left. Bradley Sutton resigned from the Meridian Grand Hotel 3 weeks after the November morning. Whether it was his decision or a decision made for him, I do not know and did not ask. What I know is that Robert was at the door the next morning and every morning after. The partnership launched on the 1st of February. Not at the Meridian Grand first, at all 7 hotels simultaneously, which was not what I had proposed at the restaurant table and which Emmanuel had decided after reviewing the logistics and determining that a simultaneous launch across the portfolio made more business sense than a sequential rollout. He called me 2 weeks before the launch to discuss it. He said, I want to launch all 7 at once. The display systems are standardized across the portfolio. The guest services training can happen at the same time. And frankly, he paused, I want people to see what this is from the beginning, not as a pilot at one property. As a permanent feature of what these hotels are, I said, that requires significantly more inventory than I currently have. He said, I know, what do you need to build the inventory? I said, time and help. I can increase my production with assistance. I have 2 women who have sold at the same flea market where I first sold, both of whom make comparable work and who have been operating at the same scale I was before the corner. If they join the partnership, we have the production capacity for the launch. He said, bring them in, same terms across all 3 of you. I said, I need to check with them first. He said, of course, their names were Precious Ademi and Yetund Fasanya, both Nigerian American. Both making handmade goods. Precious makes textiles woven and printed, and Yetund makes ceramics, small pieces, functional and beautiful in the specific way of things made slowly by someone who understands what the hand can produce that the machine cannot. Both had been at the flea market for years. Both were operating at the sustainable but not growing scale that the corner had kept me at. I called them both on a Saturday morning. Precious said yes before I had finished the sentence. Yeton said, tell me the terms again from the beginning. I told her the terms from the beginning. She said 60-40 in our favor. I said 60-40 in our favor. She said, and he retains nothing of the work itself. I said nothing. We own everything we make. He provides the platform. She said, Adiz, I have been waiting for this phone call for 6 years. I said, I know. I have been building toward making it without knowing I was building toward making it. She said yes. The launch on February the 1st was the specific beautiful thing that launches are when the preparation has been done correctly and the product is genuinely what it is presented as being. The display spaces, the alcoves, and the gift shop areas across all 7 hotels had been designed by an interior designer Emmanuel brought in, a woman who understood that the design needed to present the work rather than compete with it, and who had created settings that gave the handmade objects the light and the space they needed to be fully seen. The Meridian Grand location sold 43 pieces on launch day. The combined sales across all 7 locations on launch day were 211 pieces. I had never sold 211 pieces of handmade work in a single day in my life. I had never expected to. Chisholm called me that evening from her nursing program and I told her the numbers and she was quiet for a moment and then she said, Mom, you built this? I said, yes. She said, from the corner. I said, from the corner, from your father's hands that you have. From your grandmother's ambition that we both carry, from 4 years of knowing one block of Peachtree Street better than anyone who has ever walked through it. She said, from a folding table. I said, from a folding table that I bought second-hand and repainted forest green. She said, I love that table. I said, me too. I want to tell you about the morning of February the 2nd, the day after the launch. I set up my table on the corner of Peachtree and 16th at 7:15 as I have done 6 days a week for 4 years. I put up my canopy. I arranged my remaining inventory, reduced from the previous week's stock by the launch inventory I had committed to the hotels, but present my corner, my table, my morning. Robert raised 2 fingers from the hotel doorway across the street. I raised 2 fingers back. At 8:43, Emmanuel Achafer came out of the Meridian Grand through the main entrance, not the side exit, the main entrance, and crossed Peachtree Street. He stood at my table. He looked at what was on it. He picked up a carved wooden figure, a woman with her arms raised, the same design as the first piece I ever sold, the one Patricia Avery bought for $45 at the flea market. He said, how much? I said $80. He said, I will take it. He paid in cash. He tucked the figure under his arm. He said, I have a meeting at 9. He paused. Same side exit as always. I said, you should try the main entrance more often. It has a good doorman. He looked at Robert across the street. He smiled. He crossed Peachtree Street and went back into his hotel. I stood at my corner in the February morning and I thought about what had been built and what the building had required and what it had cost and what it had produced, and I thought about the specific quality of a thing that is built right, not fast, not impressively, but right with the materials you have from the place you are in the time it actually takes. 4 years of one corner, one lobby incident, one conversation across 22 years, 211 pieces sold in one day. One forest green table still on the corner of Peachtree and 16th. All of it connected, all of it part of the same building. I want to tell you the broader thing now. The thing that is bigger than the hotel and the corner and the partnership and the launch. There is a specific assessment that gets made about certain people in certain spaces. The assessment happens quickly in the 4 seconds between seeing someone walk through a glass door and deciding what kind of person they are. It uses the available information. The clothing, the cart, the appearance, the specific visual language of the work they do and the space they occupy. And from that information, it produces a conclusion: this person belongs or this person does not. The assessment is frequently wrong, not just in the dramatic cases, not just when the person assessed as not belonging turns out to have a connection to the building's owner. In the ordinary cases, in the daily cases. In the cases where the person assessed as not belonging is exactly what they appear to be, a street vendor, a cleaning person, a delivery worker, a maintenance person, and where that appearance has been used to decide that the full weight of their humanity does not need to be engaged. I was a street vendor. I am a street vendor. I sell handmade goods from a folding table on the corner of Peachtree and 16th. That is real, and it is what I do, and it is not something I need a connection to a hotel owner to make dignified. The dignified version of that work existed before the partnership. It existed before Emmanuel walked through his lobby. It existed in the 4 years of Robert's 2 raised fingers and the parking attendant helping with the table in the rain and Patricia Avery paying $45 for a carved figure of a woman with her arms raised and Chisholm's 2 years of community college funded by a folding table repainted forest green. The dignified version was there all along. What the hotel's security guards missed, what Bradley Sutton's lobby standards missed, was not the connection to the owner. It was the person. The full weight of who was standing there with a cart. The 22 years of building, the degree from Lagos, the 12 years of corporate retail, the 4 years of the corner, Chisholm's nursing program, the hands that had made every piece of inventory on that cart, none of that was visible in the 4 seconds it took to decide. None of it needed to be. Dignity is not something that should require a connection to a powerful person to be recognized. It is not something that should require the hotel owner to come downstairs. It is not something that is earned by success or by relationship or by the fortunate accident of a mutual acquaintance. Dignity arrives before the story. It is there on the sidewalk. It is there with the cart. It was there in the lobby. The hotel needed to come to it, and on a November morning it did. Subscribe to Black Diamonds right now. Hit that bell. Drop your name and your city in the comments below. Tell me where in the world you are watching from. Tell me if you have ever been assessed in 4 seconds and found wanting by someone who did not stop long enough to see what they were actually looking at. Tell me if you have ever been on the cold side of a revolving door. Tell me if you kept building anyway. Drop a heart if you believe that dignity does not require a connection to a powerful person to be real. Drop a heart if you have ever been moved through a space by people who decided about you before you spoke. Drop a heart if you have a folding table you repainted because the color matters. Drop a heart for Robert and his 2 raised fingers. Drop a heart for Precious and Yetund who said yes before I finished the sentence. Drop a heart for Chisholm, who is in her 3rd year of nursing school now. Drop a heart for Daniel, who taught me that what you build in a life does not end when the life does. Drop a heart for the corner, for 4 years of knowing one block better than anyone who has walked through it. Drop a heart for the carved figure of a woman with her arms raised. This is Black Diamonds. We see you. We have always seen you. Next week on Black Diamonds, a woman who delivered food to the same luxury apartment building every night for 3 years, who learned the names of every doorman, who was told one evening by the building's concierge that delivery personnel were no longer permitted to use the main elevator, who took the freight elevator for 6 months and said nothing, and what she found out on a Tuesday afternoon about who had just purchased the building and why the new owner's first call to building management was about elevator access. That story is coming. Make sure your notifications are on. Because what the new owner said on that phone call changes everything about what delivery meant in that building. Until then, this is Black Diamonds. We see you. We have always seen you.